Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, it's good to see you. It's good to see Castro's in both of my committees today. But as it relates to housing finance reform, the President's budget recently released had these words. It said, "The administration will continue to work with Congress to pass comprehensive reforms centered on several core principles." And then it goes to the first among those principles. And it says, "We need to, quote, require more private capital in the system." I would ask you, Mr. Secretary, do you agree with that concept?
Certainly. Sure.
Okay. And so if we then go to the January announcement by the FHA that it would lower the annual premiums charged to borrowers by 50 basis points, wouldn't that run counter to the principle of getting more private capital back into the system?
Yeah, I really appreciate having the opportunity to answer this question, because I know that this is an issue that has come up, and there's no question that there is some overlap there. However, I think you saw fairly assertive statements by folks like Radian and United, these private mortgage insurers, that their business is not going to be significantly impacted by this change in policy. So we have seen private capital, in fact, increase in the market significantly. We've seen our market share at FHA come down as we played our countercyclical role, and I don't believe that this is going to have much of an impact on their business.
Well, I know you'll have an opportunity to come back and testify on the budget. I think that's later this month, isn't it, or next month? But
next month, yeah.
Next month. But it just seems to me at the end of the day, Mr. Secretary, that if you, and I just ask you this question, do you believe the move to cut premiums by 40% will increase or decrease the amount of private capital in the system? I understand your explanation, but logically, what will the consequence of that be?
I don't believe that there's going to be much of a consequence, and folks like Radian and United have made clear that they don't believe there's much of a consequence either.
Well, economically, there is a consequence, and increasing the already, outsized or oversized role that the government has in this, and in housing finance, the FHA appears, in this case, to be attempting to restore its own solvency here by growing out of the problems, and thus you compete in a system like that with the GSEs. You end up in competing, and the private sector, logically, is crowded out as your market share grows and grows and grows. If we hadn't been down this road before, and had we not been debating this in 05 and 06 and 07, I wouldn't be as concerned about it. But I watched the consequences of this. And as we talk about pricing risk, I watched the consequence of not being able to price risk adequately. And clearly, the President's right when he says if we get more private capital into the system, right, that's going to provide more stability. That's going to make it easier to properly, appropriately price risk. But to the extent that you have government-sponsored enterprises that can short-circuit the supply and demand on this and arbitrarily take risks, especially when they're undercapitalized, the long-term consequence is that the private sector is crowded out, the taxpayer is left holding the bag, and that's my concern at the end of the day, and why I wish that you would look more towards the stability and getting the reserves up so that when we hit headwinds again financially or hit troubled troubled waters, you can stay afloat rather than what happened last time.
No, we absolutely are committed and working toward getting to the 2%, and we've seen a $21 billion increase in the net value of the fund. We anticipate that it's going to grow at least $7 billion a year over the next several years.
I know, but I see where the premium cut directly affects the ability to reach that 2%, pushes it off into the far distant future. And so that's why we're raising the point. It just logically is not taking us where the words put out by the White House in the budget statement, it doesn't comport. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.